Do you ever feel like your brain has 50 tabs open and none of them are loading properly? Like you sit down to do one simple thing and somehow you end up doing everything except that one thing. And then afterward, you're left with this heavy feeling, that frustration, that voice in your head asking, why am I like this? Why can't I just get it together? Because if that sounds familiar, I want you to stay with me. This might explain more than you think, and it might change the way you see yourself. Because you might not be lazy. You might be dealing with ADHD. Welcome back to Blooming After Darkness. If this is the first time you're here, thank you so much for clicking play. And if you're back again, thank you. It really does mean a lot. This is your space for healing growth and learning how to work with your mind instead of constantly feeling like you're fighting against it. And today, we're going to talk about ADHD in a real way, not just the textbook version, but what it actually feels like in everyday life and what you can start doing to manage it in a way that actually works. I want you to picture this and really sit with it for a second. You wake up in the morning already feeling a little behind. Not because anything has even happened yet, but because there's this mental list running in the background of everything you need to do. Maybe it's work, maybe it's cleaning, maybe it's responding to people, maybe it's something you've been putting off. And you tell yourself, okay, today is the day. Today I'm going to get to it. Today I'm going to get it together. Today I'm going to be productive. Today I'm going to finally follow through, and you actually believe it in that moment. So you sit down. Maybe you grab your phone just to check one quick thing. Maybe it's a message or a notification, because we know how those phones are with the dinging every 5 seconds. Before you even realize it, that one quick second turns into 10 minutes, then 20 minutes, and now there's the shift. Because now you're aware of the time. Now you feel the pressure, and instead of that calm motivation you had earlier, you start to feel overwhelmed. So now you try to start, you tell yourself, okay, just start, just do something. But your brain feels scattered, like you can't grab onto a single clear starting point. Everything feels equally important and equally overwhelming at the same time. And that makes it even harder to move. So instead of starting, you hesitate. And that hesitation turns into avoidance. And that avoidance might look like scrolling or cleaning something random that wasn't even on your list, or getting distracted by something completely unrelated, or even just sitting there stuck, knowing you should be doing something, but not doing it at all. The whole time there's this inner dialogue happening. Just start. This isn't that hard. Why are you doing this? What's wrong with you? And you're aware of it, which almost makes it worse, because it's not like you don't care. It's not like you're unaware. You are fully aware, and you still feel stuck. And then the day goes on, and maybe you get a few things done. Maybe you don't. But either way, by the end of the day, you feel drained, like mentally exhausted, even if your productivity doesn't match that level of exhaustion. And then comes the part that really sticks, the way you start seeing yourself, the way you start to label yourself, the way you start to believe that maybe you are just lazy or unmotivated or not disciplined enough. And that right there, that entire cycle, is something a lot of people with ADHD experience on a daily basis. So let's slow this down and actually understand what's happening, because ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. But that name alone causes a lot of misunderstanding, because when people hear attention deficit, they assume it means you don't have attention, like you can't focus at all. And that's not actually accurate. ADHD is not a lack of attention. It's a difficulty regulating attention, meaning your brain doesn't consistently direct focus where you want it to go. So sometimes you sit down and you can't focus at all. Your mind drifts. Everything feels distracting. Even small things pull your attention away. And then other times you're completely locked in, so focused that hours go by and you don't even realize it. You forget to eat. You forget to check your phone. You're fully immersed. That inconsistency is what makes ADHD confusing, not just for other people, but for you too, because you know you're capable of focusing. You've experienced it. So when you can't do it on demand, it feels like a personal failure, even though it's not. ADHD also affects executive functioning, which is basically your brain's management system. It's what helps you start tasks, organize your thoughts, plan ahead, manage time, and follow through. So when executive functioning is affected, it's not just about focus. It's about starting, continuing, and completing things. Which is why something that looks simple on the outside can feel overwhelming on the inside. ADHD shows up in ways that can seem small individually, but when you experience them consistently, they start to impact your daily life in a big way, like walking into a room and forgetting why you went in there, or opening your phone to do something important and getting completely sidetracked, or starting a task with full intention and then abandoning it halfway through because something else grabbed your attention. I want to take a quick moment to apologize for my multi-poo because she won't stop barking. Every time I hit record, it's what she loves to do. So, here we go. Let's get back into the video. It can look like struggling to prioritize where everything feels urgent or nothing feels urgent, which makes it hard to decide where to start. It can feel like your brain is constantly active, like there's always something running in the background. Thoughts jumping from one thing to another without fully setting. Time can feel distorted, like you underestimate how long something will take. Or you feel like you have more time than you actually do, until suddenly you don't. And then you're rushing, trying to catch up. And trust me, I've been there. You are not alone. There's also procrastination, but not in the way people usually think about it. It's not always about avoidance because you don't care. It's often because your brain is waiting for enough stimulation or urgency to activate, which is why you might suddenly become productive under pressure. And none of us want to live under pressure. Emotionally, ADHD can feel intense. Frustration can build quickly, small setbacks can feel bigger than they are. And rejection can feel deeply personal, even if logically you know it's not. And then there's hyperfocus, where you become so absorbed in something that everything else fades out, which again shows that the issue isn't your ability to focus, it's the regulation of it. Over time, experiencing these patterns can shape the way you see yourself, because when you consistently struggle with things that seem easy for others, it's natural to start questioning yourself, to start assuming the problem is you. You might start telling yourself that you're lazy or that you lack discipline, or that you just need to try harder. And those thoughts don't just stay surface level. They build, they repeat, and they start to feel true. And what makes it even harder is that you probably have tried. You've probably made plans, set goals, told yourself you were going to do better. And when it doesn't stick, it reinforces that belief that something is wrong with you. But the reality is, the issue isn't that you're not trying. It's that your brain works differently. And you've been trying to force it to work in a way that doesn't align with how it's wired. So let's talk about what actually helps, not perfectly, not all at once, but in ways that support you where you are. One of the biggest shifts is starting before you feel ready. Because if you rely on motivation, you might be waiting longer than you want to. So instead of waiting for that feeling, you lower the barrier. You tell yourself, I'm just going to do this for 5 minutes, not the whole task, not everything, just 5 minutes. Because starting is often the hardest part. Breaking things down is another important step, because when something feels too big, your brain naturally avoids it. So instead of saying, I need to do all of this, you focus on one small part, something manageable, something you can actually begin without feeling overwhelmed. External structure can make a big difference, and this is something a lot of people overlook because we're taught to rely on memory and discipline. But if you have ADHD, relying on memory alone can feel exhausting. So instead of trying to keep everything in your head, you want to move as much as possible into your environment. Using timers, reminders, lists, visual cues, sticky notes, alarms, anything that takes that pressure off your brain. Because when everything is in your head, it creates overwhelm, and overwhelm leads to avoidance. But when it's in front of you, it becomes something you can actually act on. So instead of telling yourself you'll remember to do something later, set a timer right then. Instead of trying to mentally track everything you need to do, write it down somewhere you'll actually see it, even if it's messy, even if it's not perfect. Because the goal isn't perfection. The goal is support. And when your environment supports you, you don't have to rely so heavily on willpower, which is something ADHD brains burn through quickly. And this is where body doubling can really help. And it sounds simple, but it works. Because doing something alongside someone else, even if they're not helping you directly, makes it easier to stay engaged. It gives your brain just enough stimulation and accountability without pressure. And sometimes that's all you need to move from thinking about doing something to actually doing it. And this could look like sitting near someone while you work, having a friend on the phone while you clean, or even putting on a video of someone else being productive, because sometimes the hardest part isn't knowing what to do, it's staying with it long enough to follow through. And then there's stimulation, which is something people often misunderstand because we're told to remove distractions, but ADHD brains actually need a certain level of stimulation to stay engaged. So instead of fighting that, you can use it in a way that works for you, like playing music while you're doing something, having background noise, turning tasks into something a little more interactive, or even giving yourself a small reward after you complete something. Because your brain responds to engagement, not just obligation. And when something feels too boring or too overwhelming, your brain naturally pulls away from it. Not because you're lazy, but because it's not getting what it needs to stay connected. And once you start understanding that, you stop trying to force yourself through everything the same way. And you start adjusting your approach in a way that actually supports you instead of working against you. And through all of this, one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, is how you talk to yourself. Because that voice is always there, and it shapes how you respond when things don't go as planned. If every time you struggle, your first thought is, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Why am I like this? That adds another layer of resistance. Because now it's not just the task that feels hard. It's the weight of how you're judging yourself on top of it. And over time, that builds. It makes starting harder. It makes continuing harder, and it makes everything feel heavier than it needs to be. So instead of asking what's wrong with me, try asking what would help me right now. And really pause there for a second. Because that question shifts your brain into problem solving instead of self-criticism. It gives you something to work with instead of something to fight against. Because the goal isn't to force yourself into being someone you're not. The goal is to understand what actually helps you function better. You don't need to become a completely different person to function better. And I really want that to land, because so many people think they need to change who they are in order to finally feel in control. But that's not the answer. You don't need to suddenly become more disciplined, more organized, or more motivated in the way you think you should be. What you actually need are systems that support how your brain already works. Because ADHD doesn't mean you're incapable. It doesn't mean you're behind. And it doesn't mean you're not trying hard enough. It means your brain works differently. And when you keep trying to force it into systems that weren't built for it, it's going to feel like you're constantly falling short. But when you start working with your brain instead of against it, when you start using tools and strategies that actually support you, things begin to feel more manageable. Not perfect, but manageable. And that's where real progress starts. And this concludes this video, and if you want more videos like this on ADHD, please let me know in the comments, because I don't talk about it as much, but I definitely can if it's something you need. And if something in this video stood out to you or finally made sense, please comment that too. I'd really love to hear what clicked for you. And if you're looking for more support with things like anxiety, depression, habits, and self-growth, you can check out bloomingafterdarkness.com, which I will link below in the description. That's where I share more tools and more resources to help you actually apply this in your daily life. And if you do want something more structured specifically for ADHD, I also have a digital workbook available on my Etsy store that you can work through at your own pace. And if this helped you in any way, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. It really does help support the channel and reach more people who need this. Thank you again for being here, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. And wherever you are in the world, I want you to know that you matter.